it used to sort of be every man for themselves, just fight to make that 12, and then, oh, hopefully we'll come together and we'll perform on the day. Like, we had this reserve in our team of like not wanting to share what you know about rugby. And now we've broadened that to the team, our program. Like, we want our program to earn a medal in Tokyo. It's not about you being an Olympian.
Cool. 3, 2, 1. Abby Gustaitis, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to see your face on screen, and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Kudos for pronouncing my last name right. So starting off good. To
be fair, I watched a few videos because I saw it down and I was like, I have to nail this. So you're obviously in the US. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and we are joined today by construction workers outside my window. So if you hear that coming through, that's what it is, but that's life.
Excellent. I am joined by my rowdy neighbors that moved in and are still living it up quarantine style. So
I love it. The place I want to start is your Instagram account, atown1022. Can we visit A-Town, and what is it?
Sure. You cannot visit A-Town, and it definitely does not exist anymore. But I got the nickname in college or at university, and my name, Abby, obviously starts with an A, but I was always down to do anything, like whatever it was. So A-Town Down was my nickname throughout college, and then it just sort of stuck. And what was the point in changing it? Everyone just has their first and last names as their handles, and that gets a little boring. So we'll have a little bit of a story behind it.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, I'm big on storytelling, so I love that. And just looking at your Instagram page, there's a bit of effort that goes into your page. It's a very clean and well thought out page. You're doing well.
It's wild how much social media comes into play these days, and building your brand, and who knew how much stress could be behind it. I feel for the people who actually have a legitimate following.
No, I think you're doing a great job because, I was checking it out and sort of trying to do some research on you and find out a little bit more. And I think you've presented yourself really well. And the first probably question is I wanted to start with was a little bit behind that endorsement and sponsorship. Like, have you got a few opportunities coming your way now that, your face and image is out there?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm a little choosy when it comes with partnerships. I want to make sure I'm invested in the brand. So right now I just do a little bit with some small businesses that I've gotten to know the owners and what their goals are. And similar to me, they're trying to help me in my journey, and whatever can be a mutual collaboration. I'm not sort of gunning for anything big here, and just trying to get rugby more on the map as well as myself.
Yeah, love it. What's some examples of these small businesses?
Yeah, sure. So I reckon Rickaroons is a energy bar that they live right down the street from me, and they've become some of my really great friends. And they so they're super cool, and just trying to make it in this huge world of every type of bar that exists. And then just some like kombucha. And so we have like 2 local companies here, Superfood and Company and Tap Shack. And I'm obsessed with kombucha, and it's not as big down under, but I saw it making its way over there.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's a brand here called Remedy that is going off. It's everywhere. So yeah, it's definitely having an impact. And just on that, with the small brands, like, I'm so aware of word of mouth. And I think when you get massive brands, the ones we can all think of, Adidas, Nike, like, you don't get the same word of mouth effect from the brands that you've kind of aligned yourself with. So no matter how big or small they are, I think, aligning yourself with people is really cool. Basketball. I know that you played, and all my followers know how big I am on basketball. The pictures on the wall behind me, skills, vision, teammates, communication. What has it done for you, and what's your story and journey?
Honestly, it's been a huge help crossing over to rugby sevens. I think a lot of the skills translate really well. Obviously, transition ball, going from attack to D, a lot of other sports, you're really in that positional aspect of, oh, I'm a forward, oh, I'm a guard, like I'm defense in soccer, whatever it is. But in basketball, you obviously do both. And just that mindset, I think, has helped me a lot in sevens, just being aware, let alone the hand-eye coordination. I'm an aerialist, and that's a huge part of my game. And so I think that's helped. I'm pretty tall, and so practicing basketball for, 15 years, all the way. I didn't end up going to college to play basketball, but got a little burnt out through high school and then ended up switching over to rugby.
I love it. And do you still pick up the basketball and keep those skills polished?
A little bit. I challenged Corbs to a few games, but he's pretty pathetic. So
Yeah.
Having grown up in England, it doesn't make for much competition.
Yeah, it's funny when you play someone who's just got no idea. I know what you mean. And growing up in the basketball world, who were some people that kind of inspired you and you looked up to?
Definitely Michael Jordan. I mean, but I went to the University of Maryland, and it's a huge college basketball environment, and I watched the women play there forever and winning national championship, and it's just incredible. But I really admired Michael Jordan, and learning more about him throughout the years had sort of partially molded me into like my captaining style. And then I've sort of like challenged myself with him, thinking he was an ideal leader growing up, and then really getting more insight into it. Like, oh, okay, maybe he's not the absolute perfect leader for a team, but he obviously is the best, if not one of the very best. You obviously can argue, and it's been interesting.
I love that. And I'm 100% sure you would have watched The Last Dance. And we're going to come back to sort of that team and leadership soon. But I want to stay on the skill thing. A little birdie told me you guys were busy during COVID doing skills every day. 30 minutes was the time chucked out there. So that's impressive to be doing 30 minutes of skills. A lot of people cap it at 10. So I want to know all the details, what you did, how'd you do it, the drills, the skills, what'd you do?
Definitely. So I'll start with aerials because that's my bread and butter. And I'm all about, improving your weaknesses. But if you don't have an X factor, if there's not something that you're better at than most people, then you can really find yourself isolated on a rugby sevens pitch. So for aerials, if it's just two of us, I'll try to make it challenging, but, start with straight high ball catches, angles, add in that person chasing you to provide a little bit of competition. If you have Corbs chasing you, he's not moving too fast, but he's a big body, so it's good. And then the kickoff chase. So a big part of our game is getting that ball back. So mostly working on two-handed catches, but throwing in the tap, whether single-handed and double-handed. I never played volleyball, which is to everyone's surprise, being 6 feet tall. But really trying to get that tap back, I think, is pretty critical, because a lot of times someone else is competing for that ball and you can't get a clean catch. And trying to direct the tap back. So having my receiver move to different locations and trying to get that ball to them.
I want you to explain the process. You guys get a kick off. The kicker's trying to put it in a certain area. What are you doing? How does that communication work? And how are you sort of aligning yourself to make a play?
So we have zones across the 10 meter, and we have a number for each area. And then depending on who's on the field, you have two designated aerialists, and like I would be the restart leader if I'm on the field. So I identify the space, communicate it to the kicker by signaling a number on my hand. And then the number one thing for me is eyes on the ball. The moment I look at the person I'm competing against or the space it's going to, the ground, you have 50-50 shot of catching that ball, and I want my odds to be a lot higher. So I'm maintaining eye contact on the ball the whole time, and then I'm actually creating an angle and trying to get behind the ball to put
Yep.
myself in the best position. And getting those J lines is really critical for me, because then any tap will go back to my team instead of a few rogue ones that have definitely happened.
Yeah. I try to explain it like a layup in basketball. You kind of give yourself that nice little angle and then attack the ball in the angle really well. Are you identifying a short person to try kick to, or are you just backing yourself against anyone?
I will back myself against anyone, pod included, but
Yeah.
ideally a space. So that's what I'm looking at first, especially teams know going against the US that we're going to compete for the ball. So a lot of times they'll pod, which creates bigger gaps for us to kick to. And then even if they have to shift to that, they're already podded up. So it's a little more of a challenge. So kind of playing a little cat and mouse game with them. And that's what I like to do when we're receiving as well. You give them this space, like it's open, and then you shut it down real fast.
I love it. I distracted you going back to the skills and the passing stuff. How did you structure those sessions?
For sure. So unfortunately here, parks were closed for 3 months straight.
Wow.
So we live in a community, and the grass outside the library was even shut off. So
Wow.
we're like going to play, and then there's security officer like, sorry guys, you got to keep it moving. Like, oh, okay. So a lot of times we were just in the alleyway. We have a little parking spot, or once the beaches opened up, we actually did a lot in the sand. And so for the most part, we would have another person, possibly. Like I have another roommate who plays as well, and then once she got involved, we could do live competition. But if it's just two people, we're just 8 to 10 meters apart, throwing up high balls, having the thrower or kicker come in to close the space to just provide that distraction, because you can sit there all day and catch high balls over your head with no competition or nothing, hitting your arms. But as soon as you get onto that rugby field, there's 4 people, it seems, in the air at once. And so, and then we would start with tennis balls a lot of the time and work single eye or single hands coordination and anything just to get that brain working and connecting body and mind, I think is a huge help. And like I said, coming from basketball, those skills have translated, but it's just something simple you can do every single day.
Yeah, I also think that it keeps the touch and it keeps the rhythm. Like you definitely feel when you're in form with anything and out of form. And I think that again, the crossover from basketball when you're working on your dribbling or your shot, you know when you're on, and you kind of know when you have to work harder. So it's cool to hear that. You made the most of. I suppose we're still in it, but COVID. Neurobiology. I want to learn some stuff. So that was that's what you've got your degree in, and I guess I want you to kind of explain what it is and how you apply it to things like rugby and outside of life.
Okay. So I majored in physiology and neurobiology with all intents and purposes of furthering my degree by going back to school, medical school specifically. And I've always been interested in medicine, the human body, and emergency medicine and sports, more or less. So that's kind of been my path that I created for myself from a young age. But I really just wanted to know how the human body worked. And as soon as I got to college, I saw that was an option, and I dove right in. I declared my major right when I got there. And it's really helped me in sport, because I know the little things and, the firing of neurons in your brain and building new pathways and breaking habits to form new habits and how it all works. And
How do you break a habit?
Nearly impossible, but by forming new habits.
Yep.
So it's a lot easier. You're always going to have that pathway, but if you're developing newer pathways in your brain, then those are going to override the old ones.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay on this. Talk us through it. How would we I want you to explain this.
Oh goodness, just decades later out of school, showing my age. Right, so you have neurons that are always firing, and every little thing that you do, whether, you know, like you're typing on a computer, you're catching a ball, and then that exact thing, if you're practicing it over and over, you're layering those, and so you're building that path stronger than, let's like say, dropping the ball or yeah. whatever else, a mistake. But I personally have found stopping when you've made a mistake and letting that sink in for a moment and realizing exactly what you did, and then going back if time allows, or if, you know, you're not in the middle of a rugby sevens game. I've found that that's maybe accelerated my new habits that I'm trying to form. Whereas, you know, a lot of people teach, oh, just flush it, you know, move on, next rep, you only had one chance. And right, that's life, so that is going to happen. But in this practicing where we're trying to outwork our opponents and outlearn them, as you use, those are the little things that you can control. So when I drop a high ball in training, I'm like, okay, what exactly was it that I did in that moment? Was it, oh, I just looked down at the ground, or my hands were too wide and then I tried to close them? I try to relive that moment and then do the opposite in order to correct it, and then reciprocate that. So I just try to do like 3 additional reps in the proper way in order to cement that in.
I think you use such a cool word there in the layers of building the layers behind the good habit. And I also think, and I wonder if you've got an example of coaches creating a drill or a certain time in training where you're asking, when you're wanting players to try, you know, perform at 110%. So they're actually not being safe and really cautious. A thing that I use with halfbacks is, like, I want you to throw 110% bullet passes, like as hard as possible. We're going to get some really ugly things happen, but we're pushing it. Have you kind of got something like that you've used or seen?
So I think with our transfer pass, like sort of if at your first receiver, let's say, and, you know, defense is shooting up and you just know you have to be a pivot and send that ball. And we've tried just similar to what you're saying, just send it as hard as you can, not even considering accuracy. And it's been really interesting. And for me personally, I spent a lot of time developing my left-handed pass, but the power behind it is not as good as my right. So I've tried to add in, okay, 10 passes every training session of me just firing it, like not even considering where it's going. And it really, it makes you think after of like, well, what am I doing to reserve, to hone into that accuracy that's taking away my power maybe.
Yeah.
And
I love that example you use, because I had the exact same thing. As I played first receiver, and I had exact same similar mindset. And this guy came in and he executed this pass so fast, and I was like, "Holy shit, that is what a fast pass looks like!" Yeah. And it just triggered. I was like, "Wow, I've been mucking around trying to be too cute for a long time. Just pull the trigger." Well explained. You nailed it on the spot. You nailed it.
No one told me this was a high stress, high anxiety podcast.
Yeah, true.
Just kidding.
What's the latest thing that you've learned or picked up on that, on what you've been studying or read about? Is there something recently that you've really enjoyed learning or you've heard?
Trying to think. Well, for me personally, I am always trying to improve on like the mental aspect of training, including visualization, which has never been a huge part of my game. Like some people just go to sleep before a big match and they're like, oh, I watched the whole game in my head. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Like, how did you do that? And so I've really tried to add that in, and I've read a few articles of just like, even with skills and high ball receipts, I've tried to envision myself doing the skill and like picturing, but not just doing it, like picturing the most perfect receipt or the most perfect chase and two-handed catch. And then I've actually done that right before the skill set. And I mean, who knows if it's helped yet, but that is, there's a lot of research that's gone into it. And so that's
100%.
something that I've been trying to implement that is new to me, especially since quarantine. Had a lot of time on my hands. So
I wonder if you can answer this question. A lot of people say sleep on it. And I know that there's definitely been studies when you've tried to learn something one day, you just can't get it, it's not happening. You sleep on it, you turn up the next day, and then bang, you're on fire. How does that happen?
no idea.
Don't you have a degree? No, I'm joking.
And can you turn water into wine? No. But there's a lot of studies that have gone into that. In fact, like the book I just read was one of Daniel Coyle's, like Talent Code, Culture Code. Yep. He's written all of those. And he talks about, a study where a group of college kids go and they just study for 12 hours straight. And then one group, takes 10 hours break, goes to sleep, comes back. The other group studies for 10 more hours, but doesn't sleep. And then the people who slept, did 40% better or whatever the thing is. It's like so unreal, but yeah. I'm a big believer in sleep, so you don't have to try and change my mind.
Yeah, 100%. Me too. When I started out just this business, Rugby Bricks, by myself, I definitely in the first year did not use sleep as a weapon and as a tool. And then my business partner was like, listen to this podcast. I learned about sleep and I was like, yeah, I know that I think I'm outworking people, but there's also doing things smart.
Exactly.
Nadal, the tennis player, Rafa Nadal. I know that he's big for you with his mindset and how he does things. What are some things you've picked up and love about Rafa?
For me, it starts with humble beginnings with him, and he's just a small town guy, comes from a family in this part of Spain that everyone knows him, and he's worked his way to where he is, starting from a really young age. And he never accepted just, when he got ranked number 1 for the first time, he wasn't complacent, he wasn't comfortable. He lost a match, he went to the court and hit 1,000 balls or whatever it is. And I think for me, it's like he stayed true to his roots, but he also proved to himself and to his family that it doesn't matter where you come from, and you can get to where you want to be, and no one's stopping you but yourself. And he just the hard work and his work ethic has just always been inspiring to me as an athlete.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan too. And I remember this press conference, it was Rafa versus Federer, and they asked Rafa why he plays his best tennis when he plays Roger. And he just answered by saying that it's because I'm ready to play my best tennis. It's got nothing to do with Federer. And I love that because he owned his own game. Like he was the one that was ready. He'd put in the hours, and it didn't really have much to do with Federer. And I thought that was such a cool thing. Like, I was ready to go. It had nothing to do with him. Tournaments. So you've played for the USA for a while, and I'm always interested to understand how you've seen things evolve for the team. Obviously, are you guys still co-captains? One of the captains. How you've seen the team evolve and get better at doing it. I've had a few yarns with a few of the New Zealand girls and how they've got better at tournaments. What are some things that you've noticed over your time with USA that you've got better at as a team?
I think the first thing that sticks out is the environment and the culture that we've created over the last few years. It used to sort of be every man for themselves, just fight to make that 12, and then hopefully we'll come together and we'll perform on the day. And we've spent a lot of time developing our like team identity and what our purpose is outside of rugby as well, and creating like making sure everyone knows their self-worth in the team. And I think it's really progressed us as a group. We've gotten a lot closer over the years, and especially this last year and a half, 2 years, with a new coach coming in. We had a few shifts in players, and now it seems like we have that core group, and everyone's lending a hand to help. Like, people are staying after training and asking questions, and they're not directly going to the staff and saying, oh, what was the right thing to do here? It's like, oh no, we're the ones out there, so we're going to talk to each other. We're going to try and problem solve and challenge one another. And then if we still need clarity, okay, we can work up the ladder and figure it out.
Yeah, the purpose is a real big one for me, and I know that it's always a big thing to sort of influence a generation below as well, and it sounds like that's something you girls have tried to be great role models. What have some of the talks around that been like?
Right, so rugby in America is still on the up, I hope. It seems like we've hit a bit of a plateau, but we're trying to, just like every team is, you're trying to leave the jersey better than you found it. You want to create more opportunities. Yes, you want to go and medal and do all those great things, but really it's about the trail you're creating. You want it to be easier for the next generation to see the path that they can take and to climb that ladder, and not have to, shell out $1,000 to, go to a camp and fly across the country to even be seen by a coach. But also just
that's what you had to do.
Oh yes.
Wow.
National team, even like I think
Wow.
I was paying for camps until like 3 or 4 years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's been really cool to see it progress. And we still have tons of challenges, just like any team, especially when you get into 15s and 7s. Like, luckily 7s is funded differently, but I think we want people to know what rugby is and like the inclusivity that it represents. And I think it could do a lot for the world, and like the United States especially. But I don't want people, I say, oh, I play rugby, like, oh, is that the one with the stick, or is the net behind you? And it's like, oh no, come on guys.
Yeah.
Get behind it.
Awesome message. And the other one that I want to ask about is enjoy the process. It's almost becoming like a bit of a phrase that gets overused. But as long as what enjoy the process to you means. So that's the question. What does enjoy the process mean to you? But also, as one of the co-captains, what does it mean to the team? And how do you execute on it?
Nice. It's a big part of our daily life, enjoying the process. I wake up every day grateful that I get to go toss a rugby ball around, or I get to set up some cones to do a drill. Like, not that many people get to do that in their lives, and it's a childhood dream come true. So I try to remind myself of that, and we talk about it as a group. Right, there's always something to strive for. There's the Olympics, there's Hong Kong, hopefully in 2021, which the women hopefully get to play out for the first time. But it's these every day, the showing up with a smile on your face, the opportunity to learn, to get better, challenge yourselves against some of the best players in the world. And that's something that we can't take for granted. And that's what builds our great performances at tournaments. It's the running the Broncos and then getting yelled at for 30 minutes because our skills were shit under fatigue, but it's those moments, I think, that really bring us together as a group. And we have to remind each other, that you know, it's not forever, it's not everlasting, and just take it for what it is. And you know, you hear horror stories of athletes with career ending things, and you just never know what's going to happen. But as long as we, you know, take each day in stride and try to stay present, as difficult as it is, I think that's where we really get that enjoyment.
You mentioned before about the team that was every man for themselves, and it sounds like you're in a team that's almost flipped that. How has that happened, and who's been important to make that happen?
Chris Brown coming in as the head coach helped that and helped shape that culture a lot, as well as this past year we had Warren Abrams as our assistant coach, and he came in and challenged us, and they both really have highlighted the enjoyment factor. And before, it was sort of like, oh, okay, you know, here's the next tournament, okay, here's the next tournament. And we had a lot of crossovers being the US team. Not many people have played rugby for too long. So, you know, we took players from hockey or soccer or, you know, every sport, probably table tennis, I don't know. But so before, it was like we had this reserve in our team of like not wanting to share what you know about rugby. And now we've broadened that to the team, our program. Like, we want our program to earn a medal in Tokyo. It's not about you being an Olympian. And so we've had this conversation a lot, right? Like, what is more important to you becoming an Olympian or the program winning a medal? And it, you know, if you asked our team that 3 years ago or even before Rio, it would have been, oh, I want to go to the Olympics. Like, that's what I'm here for. And it's been a big challenge changing that narrative, honestly. But I think we've come to learn that the only way we are going to win a medal is if we come together, if we share all of our knowledge, we invest in ourselves and each other, and, you know, you fight for each other on the field.
I think we often underestimate how hard it is to do something special, especially as a team. And like, there's that many documentaries out nowadays that you can watch, and everyone that's achieved something big and with a lot of weight behind it. The story starts like 4 years ago or 10 years ago, and when they're actually on the field or on the court in that moment, the bond is so strong. So therefore, you can get it done. So that's pretty cool. Must be hard for the brain to not say, "I just want to be an Olympian."
No, it definitely is, and I mean, it's in the back of everyone's mind. Like, yeah, of course, you want to represent your country on the highest sporting level, like that. And growing up in the U.S., even if you didn't watch TV, like, you watched the Olympics. Like, that is, it's just how it is. Like, it's such a big thing. Everywhere, but every, 4 years, Summer Olympics come on, like that, you're glued to the television. And but I think we're moving in that right direction. And this past year we had a few hiccups on the circuit. We finished 5th, we finished 8th, which was like our worst performance in 2 years or something. And we weren't playing with each other, and we weren't playing as a team. And unfortunately, that's how our season ended, and we have to live with that performance for the last for over a year, it seems like. And so it's been pretty annoying, to be honest, but it's also been like a little chip on our shoulder, like, oh no, we have something to prove. Like, that's not the team that we are. Like,
I'm really interested in this one because obviously the US, the United States. I come from New Zealand, and we've all been going through COVID, but New Zealand locked down their country when they had 11 cases, which I know must be pretty amazing number to hear with what's happening in the US. It's not really my question about COVID, but what's it like living in the US at the moment with the Black Lives Matter movement, the president that you guys have? And I'm more interested in the team, because there must be so much freaking noise for you girls and on the daily.
It's been a crazy year, unprecedented times, of course, for everyone. But yeah, everything's sort of come to a head during these last few months. And, it's been a long time coming for, Black Lives Movement. And I think it's bringing to light sort of what I touched on earlier, like our purpose as a team and what our mission is. And so we've really dove into those conversations. Granted, they're all over Zoom, but they're still happening. And it's, what do we want to stand for? And like, what can rugby do for our country or for our, the whole entire world? Like we've come together as a rugby team from all different backgrounds. And I think that's something we've seen a little bit across the world. And it's been trying times, I know, for a lot of my teammates, and I'm in a little different position, but all I can do is, educate myself and others and continue to listen to them and have those hard conversations. But
that must
alongside
be
COVID, I don't know.
Sorry,
No,
that must be challenging. How you just mentioned there that you're in a slightly different position, because there must be a lot of girls and people in America that feel that way. So yeah, it's a hard position, and as a captain and as a leader of a group, dealing with it as well.
definitely. I've just tried to educate myself as much as possible and talk to my teammates and hear different experiences. And I stand beside all of my teammates 100%. And we are trying to take a stand as a team as well. A lot more goes into it, being like just women's sevens underneath all of USA Rugby and like the Olympic Committee. And now, of course, all of those have taken their stand and made statements, but we're just trying to show like that how rugby encompasses everyone. There's no judgment, it's equality across the board. Like, how can we translate that into our day to day?
Yeah, awesome explanation. I suppose moving on from there, I want to hear your outwork story. So our sort of motto and brand with Rugby Bricks is outwork, outlearn. Is there a time that you can remember back to where you just outworked people? And I know you got cut from the team. It may have been one, but can you remember back to a time where you just went after it?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this actually. I I like to think I outwork a lot of people on the normal, but I think a specific example was I didn't get picked for, it was Kitakishu in 2018, and I had gone to the previous two tournaments, played a lot of minutes, and then I got a little complacent, and I was, oh, okay, I'm fine. I played, I started it, I'm in a good spot. And then, slowly the weeks went on as we were prepping for the next tournament, and then the roster comes out and my name wasn't on the list, and I was shocked. But then on reflection, I was like, well, what did I do to prove that my name should be on that list? Like, what was my mentality?
Why did you get cut?
I didn't make that team because he said he was giving someone else an opportunity who showed like who showed their work ethic and their skill set, and they were playing the same position as me, and just said it was a toss up, and he went that route because he saw the like the desire and in her. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Damn, what was I doing? And then after I had that conversation, I had to check myself, because I was not putting in all of my efforts every training to prove that I deserve to be on the team, that I deserve to play on the circuit. And it was like that. So the team comes out, and then you have a week to train together before the team leaves for tour. And I just went nuts. Like every every kickoff was mine, every receipt. Like I was at every breakdown and just zooming around, like doing my job to the best of my abilities and encouraging my teammates. And, you know, I remember we made the team leaving for tour not look great. And so I just wanted to prove like, hey, you know, this is what I bring to the table. But that was my own fault for not showing that day in and day out. Like when you're in a full-time training environment, every day matters. And I learned a really hard lesson by not getting to go on that tour. And then I got selected for the next tour after that week of training, because they were pretty close. The two tournaments were pretty close to each other, so we didn't have a lot of time to train in between. And then I remember going into my first game back, and I was a sub, and I was pissed again that I was a sub. And I was like, come on. And then the moment I went in, and it was a kickoff, and I went and I got the kickoff back, and then I like sort of like got it together, and I was like, okay, Abby, like you're here, you're doing your job now, just like, let's focus in on the team.
You mentioned at the start that on the daily, you feel like you do outwork people. I'm not going to ask you to explain what you do. What I'm going to ask is, if you were to tell a young up and coming girl or boy about how to outwork people, what would you tell them to do on the daily?
Well, I would say, like, this is a little lame, but like the three things that, you know, I read this, like the three things you can control in any situation is your attitude, your preparation, and your effort. And it's really stuck with me. And so for me, it's always about those three things. And your attitude is the easiest thing you can check. And then, so preparation comes in with outworking. And for me, it's doing every little thing to your best of your abilities. I guess that's partially effort as well, but not ever settling and getting complacent, which is where that's how I've learned one of the harder lessons of my life. And just continuing to challenge yourself. Like you're always going to challenge your teammates and those besides you, but as long as you are doing better than you did before, then I think you're on the right path and you're outworking yourself.
Yeah, great advice. You know, I suppose where I want to go from there is one of your habits. Like you're 29 now. I suppose what's something that you've done or brought into life more recently that keeps you on and keeps you really going? Obviously, sleep's a big one.
I was going to say sleep.
Okay, let's explain what effect sleep has had for you, because it's so important, and maybe how you do it at tournament. Like, how do you nail sleep at a tournament?
Okay. So for me, sleep is like my number one recovery tool. I literally set aside 10 hours that I want to be laying in my bed. Like I might not be asleep that whole time, but I want to be chill, like no screens, like relaxing. And I'm a huge reader, so I always read before bed. And I think that it's like relaxing. It switches your mind off when it's going a million miles a minute, like throughout the day, especially in training. You know, you're constantly questioning like what you're doing, what they're doing. You're watching film. It's a lot. And so I think it's a way to switch off. You can just dive into something. You don't always have to read like a self-help book or a leadership book. Like, those are good too, but they're not really the great for pre-bed unwinding. And so I'm also one of those weird sleep mask people. I think those are really helpful. And yeah, so it's just all about like turning off for me. Like,
it's been proven, like so many studies have been done that that sleep, just like what you mentioned before about the two groups of students studying and athletes, and even some of the stats that come out with athletes, how they execute their skills and shooting percentages and stuff like that. How do you juggle that? Because when you go to a tournament in this amazing city and the girls are all going to watch a movie, and you're like, I've got to get my 10 hours.
Yeah.
I suppose that's that selfish athlete. You have to just do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I get called like a loner or like antisocial grandma. Like, I mean, the list goes on, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who's pretty rested and going into the next day, especially with those early starts on tournament days. Like, we got to chill out. But luckily, the staff and everyone, they make it pretty easy for us to unwind and relax on tournaments. They we have to fill out like a roommate survey before every tour of like if you're an early to bed, early to rise, or if you're light sleep or whatever it is. And then once you've been around for a bit, you usually have a roommate or two that know you pretty well, and they'll you get along pretty easily to get that shut eye.
Yeah, that's so cool. Your time in Australia, you came over and played. I know a few of the girls that I coach know you and had a bit to do with you. So how did that come about? How was the experience? What did you learn?
Oh man, I think Australia is just one of my favorite places. Like the people there, absolutely.
Where were you?
I was in Cronulla for most of it. And my first trip there, I went and played for Canberra in the Uni Sevens, and let me tell you, Canberra is not what I pictured when I pictured coming to Australia for the first time. I was like, man, I'm gonna be on the beach, like this is gonna be the life. I'll play a little rugby, and then I was like, where the hell am I? And it was August.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I ended up, one of my club coach had connected with Tim Walsh at the time. He was still the women's coach, and he mentioned this tournament. And so my teammate and I, club teammate, we both went over. She played for Tasmania, and which was a whole nother thing, like her going down. She was like, where the hell am I? And so, and then
there was a reason that there was spots on those teams.
Exactly. I was like, where's Bond University? Why is that team full? I'm confused. But no, yeah, so I ended up staying for a few extra weeks, and I played for what was then called Pride Sevens in like Central Coast, and I trained in Cronulla or Caringbah technically, and just went through like a 4-week S&C program, played a couple tournaments, and I just fell in love with the place, the training environment. I became really close with Cassie Staples and connected me there, and then I went back again the year after that, and then I luckily got to play in Sydney Sevens twice, and I stayed after both times, and it's just like formed a second family down there, and I just love it.
What do you think you picked up from playing? I played sevens in New Zealand, and when you play provincial sevens in New Zealand, you come up against some freaks of athletes and talent. And I just remember, like, it was the best thing for my defense. Like, I'm having to deal with these guys.
Yeah.
What was something that you weren't getting in the US that maybe you got exposed to in Australia?
So I had played mixed touch for a year prior to going over there, and that had really elevated my game, just playing next to guys and the speed and just touch in general. I'd never played it competitively, just obviously like pick up right before you have training, and that's just a complete joke. But so going and playing there, a lot of the girls came from touch background, and in contact, they might not have been ideal, but just the ball skills were unmatched to, especially comparing club level to here in the US. It's very much the opposite. It's more like, who can like out physical the other team to get across, who can like break through and maybe get an offload. But there it's very a lot of finesse, I would say. A funny story, so I play prop, and my first game there, we played Bond, and they put me in the centers, and scrum, there's a scrum, and I'm like walking over to the scrum, like, no, Abby, like, you're in the center. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So I get who's across from me, Charlotte Caslick, and I was like, great, this is gonna be really awesome. And she just turns me in and out, and I was just standing there just like, please, someone put me back in the scrum. And I've come a long way from then, and it really helped me progress as an athlete and player. But I just remember being just so embarrassed, and I was like, and I hadn't played on the circuit at that point for the US yet, and so I was like, nice.
Those experiences where you just get absolutely done. You either sink or swim. You either don't play again, or you decide, right, I've got to fix this. I want to ask you about Charlotte, because I've had her on the podcast, and the thing that came across from Charlotte was she is an absolute killer. Like, on the field, she is just there to win and relentless. And I guess speaking to the younger generation, and I'm picking it up from you as well, is like just that competing on every play, the effort is a big thing. How do you get that inside yourself? How do you build on that? Because I think within boys and males, and we're a little bit arrogant and confident, I can do anything. Whereas sometimes with females, it has to be just given a little bit.
Just that, like, that competitive edge, or just that, like, mindset. Is that, I honestly, well, I grew up with two older brothers in the household, and I just got crushed, like, my whole entire childhood, just like, no, you're in the wrong, like, oh, punch, you're this, I get pushed down, I got pushed off a trampoline, and like my nose was bleeding, and my brothers go or then they punched me in the face. They're like, oh, go tell mom you fell down. I'm like, Mom, I fell down. And I'm like, why did I just do that? Like, why didn't I just say I got punched in the face? Like, I'm so confused. But I think that sort of like made me, like, it built me a backbone from a young age. And then just, I always wanted to play sport. I played baseball with my brothers because, you know, our softball team got cut, and I was a pitcher, and like, their pitcher's a girl, like, oh, she can't throw. And so it was just like those little things that I think over the years, like, slowly built me up. And then finding rugby, I never played a physical sport like that, and it's unreal. I mean, it still is, like, the amount of contact, and it shocks everyone still, because we, don't hear about rugby, I guess. But from then, I think I see the drive in my teammates as well, and I think that's what kind of like gets me going too, especially when we're there for a tournament. Like, the belief in one another, I think, is so cool, and like that we've had to build that over the years. Like, earlier when I was saying about our team, and I didn't feel that, I didn't have that like fight for one another, and so that, and then you just kind of always want to like one up people, and I think that it's really deep rooted in me that like I could never one up my brother, so now I'm like, okay, well, now I'm on an equal playing field with people, so I can do it now.
It's such an interesting one, and I think your brother's definitely had a part to play. And just to wrap up, I'm going to just ask you about your dad and sort of what he means to you and as a role model. But just with that, those situations you're in, like in the baseball team and on the field, like, I reckon the best advice that I try to give is just stand your ground. And I think if that's all you do, you're probably going to be successful. Like, you don't always have to be the loud one and the aggressor, but when it comes down to it, stand your ground and don't take that backward step on the field, but also in life as well. So, moving on to your dad. I know he plays a big part, and we'll sort of wrap up on this question. How has he kind of influenced you and led you to be Abby?
Yeah, love my dad. He's he's been the day one, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. And so he was a volunteer firefighter, and so he grew up in the fire department, and my brothers and I just run around like just being kids. But I realized like we moved to a new town when I was like 5, and he joined that fire department, and I just watched him work his way through the ranks to become the local fire chief. And looking back, I just remember like I always was so proud and like idolized him, and I watched him just become this leader for another group of people that he had like dove into this new community and just rose up. And I just think it was so cool and inspiring to me that it made me just go out there and just want to be the best version of myself and to make him proud as well as my mom. But I think he's really driven me to be that like task oriented leader and like by example. And we both have that work on of empathy and relationships with personnel or teammates, and I'm constantly working on it. But he would very easily run into a burning building just as much as he could stand outside and run the scene and divvy up tasks and tell personnel what to do. And I like to think that that's what I would do on the rugby field as well. Like I'll go do it, or like I can manage the group as well. And that's sort of like led partially to my leadership style is sort of like, do what you're telling other people to do. Like, you got to do the hard work as well, but also like communication styles and getting the job done. And he's just supported me endlessly. He drove to all my games growing up, like basketball, we're playing a couple hours away, like he's there. And it means a lot to me. It still does. And just, I hear him telling people about me, and it cracks me up like, oh, my daughter's on the USA rugby team. And like, he's just so proud. And I think for me, that's what I'm after. I just want to make him proud and my family proud, as well as myself. Like I feel that responsibility, but they did everything for me growing up. And so
that's so
special.
cool. And you said what I was thinking about, get the job done. And we, as a leader, like it doesn't really matter how we get this job done, whether I have to do it or we do it or you do it. Just get the job done. So such a cool message. Thanks for that, Abby. It's been awesome chatting, and I know we went all over the place and challenged you a few times, which is always great. But I guess from me, like there's a photo on your page of all the captains of the team walking towards the camera, and like just when I looked at those girls and looked across, I was like, yeah, like we're on the right track with the women's game, and these girls have come a long way. They're all amazing at what they do and world class, and I think that you're definitely one of them. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll go brush up on my neurobiology for round 2.
That's right. Yeah, when you're back on the podcast in a year or 2, I need some more information.
Exactly.
But thanks so much.
Appreciate it.